Oh, good morning. My name is Professor Claire Collins, and I'm co-founder of the Henley Centre for Leadership. The centre is active in research and education and peer-to-peer practice learning. Today, I'm particularly pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of our Leadership Gem series. And I'm delighted to introduce Ms. Maria Ohisalo, Chair of the Greens and Minister of the Interior, Finland. Good morning, Maria.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation.
You're very welcome. Thank you for making the time to talk to us. So, Maria, when you look at your career so far, when did you first think that what I'm involved with feels like leadership?
Well, this is a good question. I think leadership definitely is something that you're not born with it. I don't think so. I think anybody can become a leader. And it's something that you practice and you become better at. If you wish to, you have to want it. And maybe at some point in my life, I realized that, okay, if I want to push these things forward in this world, if I want to push equality, climate issues to the political agenda, I have to be there myself. I have to take the leadership role, and via me, these topics can come into the political area and arena and to the agenda. Because I've noticed that quite often young people tend to be quite afraid of, for example, becoming candidates in the elections. They think that, no, I'm not enough. I don't know everything about everything. And what I'm always saying is that even more shy people can become leaders, can become politicians. If you think that I'm here because of these topics, I'm not here because of me. And that is something that has actually helped me in these positions. And then I think also NGOs have a really important role in, especially when it comes to young people and leadership there, that you can start learning leadership skills, meeting people who think of the same questions and want to change the world. And that is one of my roots, also how I ended up becoming a politician here. Then, of course, one big question related to leadership is always representation. And if you don't feel that there is anyone like you representing you and the most important topics, this often comes back to minorities, still females as leaders, then it might feel more difficult to join. And that's why we need examples and those who can break the glass ceilings.
Thank you. That's really inspiring. And I'm interested in what you say about even introverted people can become leaders, because very often introverts feel that they're not able to be leaders because they're not sort of extroverted and out there. So that's a really good message, really inspiring. Thank you. So what skills do you use when you have to lead those outside your immediate group, such as opposition members or lobby groups or the press, for example?
Well, obviously, you have to always think that, for example, opposition politicians, they might become your partners in a coalition government one day. So you sort of have to build bridges all the time, everywhere, even though you disagree. But I also think that we see very sad examples of democracy not working, and oppositions that are pushed into margins, that we really have to push for such a democracy where not only the governments can work, but also the opposition can work openly. And we as government members can also learn from the opposition parties all the time. So I want to have that dialogue all the time, ongoing. And of course, media has become much more center in the toolbox that we use. Media, social media, politicians have to be all over the place all the time. You have to be in TV, newspapers, radios, all the social media channels at the same time. And that is a way to try to attract as much as people as you can. But it means that it takes a lot of effort and time. And that is, of course, also away from the self decision making processes. Then afterwards, you've had budget negotiations. You have to go to media and explain what actually happens, and you have to tell the best sides of the decisions and try to leave the worst sides out and so on. So it's a media game also all the time. And I think that's also part of a working and functioning democracy, that we also serve the media all the time, because it's their role to see that we are working according our laws and according to what people have voted us to do for, and so on. So that's why we also need to take time for media relationships a lot. And so maybe cooperation to different directions all the time, and using different kinds of tools to try to tell people that this is what we are doing here with your mandate, that it's you who gave us the mandate, you're the most important, and you influence these decisions by choosing us, and this is what we are now doing. So there are a lot of things in the toolbox all the time.
Thank you. And I'm sure that you've got a very long career ahead of you, but I wonder if you've thought about this so far. But what would you like your leadership to achieve? What would be your legacy, if you like?
I've studied social policy as my master's, and then I did my PhD in sociology, and these questions, together with climate, environmental issues, brought me to politics. I'm a person who was brought up in a welfare state, and I was able to educate myself as long as I wanted. And this would not have been possible in many countries in the world. So I ended up coming to politics because I wanted to defend the welfare state, and at the same time not forgetting that we only have limited resources in this globe, and we have to protect the nature at the same time. So that's something, and also maybe all the time trying to, when it comes to my position as a Minister of the Interior, trying to lift up those groups that don't have a voice in this society, that tend to become victims of crimes, accidents. We see statistically that these people tend to be the least well-off people of this society. So we have to see that social exclusion is very much interlinked with our security, internal security in this society. And that's why I want to combine these topics, that I personally thought that when I heard that this is the post or portfolio that the Greens would get from the government. We now have 3 ministers. And this is the first time the Greens of Finland have the Minister of the Interior post. I think it's actually the second time in the world history that a Green politician holds this position. So I heard this and I thought that, okay, this is perfect for us. We are here to defend human rights, defend the right to seek asylum, not only in Finland, but also in the European Union level. We are now renewing the whole immigration policy in the European Union level, and that is where we need each other. None of the countries can function by themselves only. And I also wanted to bring this idea that I mentioned, that social politics and internal security are interlinked. And I want to speak about the wider idea of security, so that security is influenced, for example, by nature deterioration or climate change. We see that more and more elderly people suffer from heat waves. or more and more storms and floods and drought. All these questions actually affect our internal security quite a lot. So I think there are a lot of messages I want to leave from this post, but also why I'm in general involved in politics. So I feel very privileged to be able to be in this position where I can push for these topics.
Wonderful, thank you for that insightful answer. Really, really broad. What a legacy you will have, indeed. So, do you think that there are particular characteristics for women in political leadership? And if so, what do you think they are?
First of all, I think there are a lot of expectations for females, expectations that don't go hand in hand. They can be totally like separate. They can be something that you have to be warm-hearted and caring. And at the same time, if you are too much of that, then you are not considered as a proper leader and tough leader. And that is also probably one of the reasons why I especially wanted to choose this portfolio, because I also wanted to show that not only the Greens, but also females can take this portfolio. We can be here to secure our internal security in many ways. And I've also heard that if I haven't been enough warm-hearted in some interviews, then people have called me the ice princess or whatever. Do you see these kinds of things related to male leaders in politics? Not quite often. And maybe also that quite often I hear that females are not expected to comment on things that are wide, that I might be asked for, okay, now you're the police minister, now you can only comment on this, and this is where you have to stay. You cannot speak about anything else. Or if I have my PhD on sociology, then I cannot comment on economical affairs and issues. But of course I can, especially as a party leader, I have to do everything. I have to have a stance on all of the political questions on the agenda. So maybe this is something also, but I don't think there is something that all of the women in politics have that everybody has to have. I think politics is the best when we can attract as many people as we can. And one of my maybe also messages or legacies is that I want to attract younger people all the time to become involved in politics, so that we have all the time the next generation growing up, and we're building this movement all the time, and not just thinking that the power is with me all the time, and I'm always the person taking care of everything. Not so, but this is also something probably written down in the green ideology that we want to share power. But this can also become problematic, because in politics you have to be that one big person who is always in charge of everything. And then if you want to share power and show that we're here together, we're a movement, and we are listening to people around us, and we want to change these things as people want us to change them, then that can also become a message that, okay, well, she wasn't strict enough a leader, or she wasn't visible enough a leader, or all of these questions I've heard and I've encountered them.
Yeah. I wonder, leading on from that, what would you say to young people and young women especially who might be thinking about a political career because they care so much about issues?
Well, I think everybody should just go for it. I think you should leave shame totally like this. I think as a sociologist, I've especially written some articles on shame and poverty and so on. And shame is something that keeps us from not doing things in this world, and not trying to push for our dreams. And I think everybody should think that you can become whatever you want to, and as long as you are being ashamed of you being you, then things are probably not moving into the right direction. And that's why, and also maybe that I think from the startup scene, I've noticed the change of the way we think of failures. For example, I guess the startup scene from San Francisco or Silicon Valley or those, I think they started this kind of a day um, of not. I'm not sure about the name of the day, but something that failure is okay. That this is the International Day of Failure or something like that. And I think also in politics you have to. People actually also sometimes might think that this is also a normal person who can fail, that politicians are not anything else than normal people and they also do mistakes. And you have to be prepared for really difficult situations where you did not probably succeed 110%, but you maybe only succeeded 50%. And especially in the coalition governments, you have to be ready to make compromises and trying to sell these compromises to your electorate and people who voted for you. It's a tough job, but you still have to be ready for that. And I always tend to say to people that if you don't influence, there will always be somebody who will use that power for you. And statistically, we see that these people tend to be more well off, tend to be more male, tend to be more white when you look at the representation of the whole population or society. So I think just go for it, and then also try to, although I don't think politicians should be there to take all the hate speech of the world, but this unfortunately is part of the world where we are living in. And the more and more nameless trolls of the internet also try to influence your work. They try to silence you, but then you just take it here and take it out from this other ear and try to think that maybe you're such an important influencer that these people want to silence you. So maybe you just need to somehow don't become cynical of this world, because this world is not always the happiest place, but still the world of politics can change a lot.
I like Sheryl Sandberg's question: what would you do if you weren't afraid of anything? And I think
that's a big question. I don't think there is ever a situation where, because people tend to be afraid of losing what they have. And that's what we actually see when we look at riots and situations where people don't feel that they have anything to lose anymore. Then they probably think they are probably not afraid of anything anymore because they have lost already so much. And this is a big question related to internal security. And in worst cases, this can lead to very unbalanced situations in our societies. But maybe I would definitely try to make more ambitious climate policies. I would try to get more and more people to understand that this globe definitely has its limits, and the loss of biodiversity and species is definitely here to. It affects us. It is going to affect us even more in the becoming years. Or if I could, I would try to fix our world into a better place, so that discrimination, social exclusion, these structures that are hindering some people to go forward in their lives, and this, I could take away these structures. But I'm trying to do that piece by piece and step by step, but it takes time. And of course, so that when we have achieved something, we also need to be sure that these, let's say, for example, females' rights in general, if we look at the right to abortion, we thought that this was something that was achieved decades ago, but suddenly there are people fighting for this right, even in our backdoors here in the European Union or in the US. And I just heard yesterday when I spoke with females working in the rescue services sector, which is very much male-dominated sector in this country. There is only one female leader in rescue services in this whole country still. But they just told me the example of international questions that, for example, in some European countries, females are not able to, it is forbidden in law for them to carry stuff over 25 kilograms. So, for example, becoming a rescue servant, you cannot become that if you're a female. And that is forbidden in the law and legislation. And this is something that we're living today. I thought this was like 50 years ago that these kinds of things happened. So we have to be here to defend these rights all the time too.
So who or what inspires you at the moment?
I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been a really influential and inspirational speaker, and definitely something a bit different, a fierce young politician who is definitely seems not to be afraid of anything, or Kamala Harris. These examples definitely are showing the way to the whole world. And then I would lift up also Member of Parliament Satu Hassi here in Finland. She is one of the founding persons of the whole Green League 30 years ago in this country, but she is still an MP and she has been a member of European Parliament. She's an engineer and a PhD and really like a tech-oriented person, and has been showing to many young people, especially girls and us younger females, that we can do whatever we want to. So not too many people can set up a new party and become leaders in many different sectors in their lives. So I really want to thank her for all the work she's done.
Thank you, that was lovely. I want to turn now to the fact that leadership doesn't always go right. As you say, sometimes it's only 50% right. I wonder if you could tell us about perhaps a time when leadership has gone wrong for you and what has happened in that situation.
Well, this is definitely something that happens. And as I mentioned, especially when you're working with, for example, now we are 5 parties forming a government in this country. 5 parties that have very different political platforms, which are now put together as a governmental program. We have good goals, but when we are trying to achieve these goals, it means a lot of steps before that. And what kind of political steps we take, this is a struggle or a political debate all the time. And this is part of the work. But one thing is to be able to be humble. When you realize that, okay, things didn't go as they were planned, you have to be humble. And people definitely, I think, appreciates that quite a lot. Just a few weeks ago, we had local elections here in Finland, and actually out of the 5 government parties, 4 lost their seats and mandates the countrywide. So maybe the fact that we are now bearing the responsibility of on the governmental level, it didn't show in the local elections, or people actually didn't vote much. The turnout was only 55%, which is very low. And we can ask whether, especially the most well-off, they did vote as they do, but the least well-off people, they don't vote that much, and that is also a problem for our democracy. But I think during the couple of weeks after the election loss, we have had actually better debates than I've had during my 13, 14 years in this party. Better debates on who we are, what we want to achieve, where we are going, and what were the reasons for the loss. And I think that's why sometimes losing and making failures is something that just needs to happen. It can help you become better. But if you always just fly from a victory to another, then probably you never stop thinking that are we doing the right things. So being humble and maybe trying to also debate and discuss, trying to ask other people and not just trying to show yourself that, okay, I know the answers for this loss. If I would know all the answers, then we wouldn't have the loss in these elections. So also, I really want to have roundtables with researchers, NGOs, the people who didn't vote for us, and so on. So it's a good place to stop.
Good place for debate. And following on from that, what do you think is your biggest fear in your leadership, in your political leadership?
Well, especially during this COVID-19, we were suddenly in a situation where we didn't know what kind of a disease this is, what will follow if we make all kinds of restrictions into our society. And we have actually done quite tough decisions, not after the Finnish bigger wars that we have been part of. We haven't been closing our borders as much as we now were forced to do. And there were some sleepless nights when I was thinking that, okay, if we do this, what will happen to the free movement of whole Schengen area, free movement of people, goods, knowledge, information, services, all of this. And maybe the biggest fear that, okay, are we doing right things if, let's say, at some point we were forced to shut down our schools for a little while, because the spread was quite big in especially younger people's circles. And later on, we've got evidence that was not the best decision, that actually we can be able to keep our schools open and at the same time tackle the disease. But especially these situations have been really difficult because we didn't have the information enough, not scientific evidence on what is the most effective way to do this. And all of the restrictions have had a very big cost when it comes to social exclusion, people's well-being, loneliness. So it has been all the time like balancing between the restrictions, and then safeguarding people's lives and health. And this has definitely been a quite tough job during these 1.5 years now.
Yes, I recognise that, of course. That's the case everywhere. And what do you think that a post-COVID world will look like? What will leadership look like when eventually that new normal does finally appear?
I hope the leadership will take more into account scientific data, information, that we will be able to resource our universities better, research much better, because we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be vaccinating our people if we didn't have science. We didn't stop this virus if we didn't have science in many ways. So I hope that this will become one major route in the future, that we will take more resources into that sector. Maybe also our political world tends to be quite siloed. So we have social and health affairs here, we have internal security here, and foreign relationships there. But this COVID actually brought us all to come together and fight together. inside the government, inside this society, but also internationally. We know that we don't tackle this disease if we don't work together from around the world, that we have to share the best practices together. We have to listen to each other. And the next time, and I guess, unfortunately, not just if, but when these kinds of diseases will again spread, that we could share much more openly information about where did it come from, what kind of a disease, what can we do, can we share medical equipment. For example, we've sent stuff to India, Nepal to try to help them. For example, they didn't have enough oxygen at their hospitals. So in the European Union level, we've tried to help together. So hopefully these things, and hopefully also the more diverse idea of leadership, that anybody can become a leader who can also tackle these kinds of crises. We had been here only for 1.5 years as this government when the crisis started, and it maybe there were a lot of doubts whether these younger females could tackle this crisis, but actually we managed quite well if we look at it now. Of course, we know we can do analysis later on when we all got through this pandemic.
There's a lot that we can learn from this, I'm sure. And we've come to my final question, Maria. Thank you so far. So the question I have is, Henley Centre for Leadership is part of a business school, and we should be researching and studying and helping the world to learn about leadership and leadership-related issues. In your mind, what's the one issue that you would like a centre like us to really think about in order to make the world life better somehow?
Well, thank you for the good question and for your good work. I think as we politicians haven't been able to tackle, for example, climate crisis as fast as we should have, I think businesses have a huge role in what they can do. What happens already in many entrepreneurs and many businesses is that they actually realize that tackling climate change is a huge asset. It is a way of taking new innovations to world and export new innovations of green technologies and technologies that at the same time lower the emissions, but at the same time create new jobs, create new wealth. And I think this is the major topic at this time right now. And we should stop thinking of, as it tends to be, that there are businesses and then there are climate or environmental issues. They should go hand in hand. Actually, many businesses have already realized this. And I definitely want to thank them, because I sometimes, as I mentioned, that maybe not always the politicians are able to do these decisions, then businesses go already a couple of steps ahead. Then also maybe one question that I thought, when it comes to elections and democracies and how they function, as I mentioned earlier, we have a problem that only the most well-off people tend to vote. And the voices of those people who definitely need the services of our welfare states, they should be there to give their votes, that they should be able to think and say how much of all kinds of subsidies should be rose, or what should we do for our services in order to lift up more people. Because we actually know that the better the societies do, actually often those societies that are more equal, they tend to do better in many statistics. And also actually businesses that tend to be diverse and tend to represent more people and lift up more people, they statistically we know that they are doing better. So if these topics you can somehow also lift up on your agenda. And I guess that you're already probably doing this. Then thank you for that.
Well, thank you for that, because that's absolute music to my ears. They're all the topics that I'm completely passionate about. And thank you, Maria. I mean, that was a tremendous interview. I wish we could talk on and on and on, but I know you've got an incredibly busy day ahead of you. And I'm just really grateful that you gave us the time to do our Leadership Gems interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk with you, and I'm hoping all the best for you. And let's hope that this COVID-19 will soon be over and we can start our lives again, start living that so-called normal, or maybe it's the new normal afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you.